have my utmost respect and praise for attempting to start university. I know we're not in the thick of the pandemic like we were last fall, but things are still totally weird. And you're a group that we'll remember for a long time as being fearless and adaptable. So keep it up. Take care of yourselves and have fun. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to your second UPrep session, I believe. So this is the library session. My name is Carla Flengeris, and I am the coordinator of the library at Luther College. First, we're going to talk about the U of R libraries as if we were on campus. So we're going to project ourselves into the future when we're all fully back on campus, back to normal, walking around, and we're going to talk about where the libraries are and what you can find in them. We'll talk about a few of the things that you need to use libraries effectively. Then I'll explain why university libraries are different than the libraries you may be familiar with. And then we'll go through some demonstrations on how to find library material and how to access this material during this transition semester, as we're calling it. We'll talk about citing this material and what your instructors are expecting your bibliographies to look like. And finally, I'll make sure you know how to reach out to me when it's time to ask for help. Okay, so there are 4 libraries on this campus. The first one is the main one and the big one, the Dr. John Archer Library. Often it's referred to as Archer or just the library. And then each of the federated colleges have a library as well. Our library, the Luther Library, is on the main floor of Luther College, right across from our cafeteria. Campion's library is located on the 2nd floor of Campion College, which is the building next door to us. And across the road from us is the First Nations University of Canada. And they have a library on their main floor, right as you enter the building. So these are the 4 academic libraries at the U of R, and we'll get into what that means in a few minutes. But in addition to these 4 academic libraries, we have several resource centers on campus that, depending on your area of study, might also be useful. The Gabriel Dumont Institute Library in College West specializes in resources pertaining to Indigenous and Métis culture and history. The Teaching Preparation Center in the Education Building is where we house a lot of material that education students would find useful. La Rotonde in La Cité is our main source on campus of French language material. And the Geography Department in the Classroom Building operates a collection of various maps. Now, for the fall semester, as we transition back to being on campus after a year and a half of being almost completely shut down, the Archer Library and the First Nations University of Canada Library will be open regular hours. The Campion and Luther libraries, I think, are going to continue to operate remotely, meaning our doors will not be open and you may not be able to just wander in and use our computers this coming term. We're going to see how this goes. We've got a feeling there aren't going to be a lot of students on campus anyway, but we might be wrong about that. And if we are, we'll recalibrate, we'll change our plan and we'll open after all. Nevertheless, we are still able to provide you with all of the materials from our collections in ways that we'll get into soon. Every student that is enrolled in any U of R class, including Campion, Luther, or FNUC classes, has full access to all 4 libraries and the resource centers, meaning that once we're all fully open, you can walk into any one of them, borrow their books, use their computers, ask their staff for help. There's no limits when it comes to library access. You use the library you want, you use the library you need. It doesn't matter where you register for classes, okay? Your student photo ID card is your library card at all 4 libraries. Now, student photo ID cards are normally obtained at the registrar's office in the Administration Humanities building, and I think you can still get them there, but with things being as they are, you can also request them online by uploading a couple of pieces of ID. The U of R website has pretty clear instructions for this. So, like most libraries, we have a lot of books. We have lots of computers, photocopiers, scanners for you to use, and we have private and quiet study spaces. Particularly Campion and Luther libraries tend to be quiet. But we also have group or collaborative study spaces that can be booked at both Luther and Archer Library. Not this fall, but again, once we're fully back in the swing of things, some of the campus libraries, including Luther and Archer, loan out tablets and laptops. We have audio-visual equipment. The Luther Library is getting some podcasting equipment that you'll be able to use if you need it. And normally we have these required readings that your instructor may keep housed at the library, which we call course reserves. Now, these will not be in operation this fall because they are high demand and high touch sources that just don't jive with pandemics. So we're trying to digitize as much of that as possible, but do expect course reserves to return in the winter and in future semesters. So we talked about student photo ID cards, but another thing you'll need is the login information to 2 different personal accounts that now belong to you. One of them's got a lot to do with libraries, the other does not, but the 2 often get confused, so I wanted to spend a minute on this. You now have what's called a UR self-service account. You were assigned one as soon as you were admitted and assigned a student number. This is the account that has nothing to do with libraries, but it is the account that you would use to check your textbook list on the bookstore website. You log in with this account when you need to pay the university your tuition or printing charges. It's how you register in classes or drop classes, which is why you're probably already familiar with this account. And it's how you'll let the university know if you move or change your phone number or any other personal info. So that's self-service, but you have another account called your URegina account, or sometimes this is called by its old name, your Novell account. You would have been assigned this login after you registered in a course. Your username is usually a shortened version of your last name along with a number, whatever. You don't get to choose it. And your password starts off being usually a variation of your birthday, but you should change that as soon as you're able. So this is the account that you would use to access your U of R email, UR courses, which is a big one. That's the course management system that your instructors will be using heavily this semester. It's where your lectures and course content are all likely to be, especially if your course is taught remotely. And as I'm saying this, I'm realizing you probably know all about that. You probably had to get into UR courses to get here today, right? So it's also the same login that you'll use when you're on campus and want to access our free wireless or log into the computers in our libraries or our computer labs, or print or scan or photocopy. And finally, it is the login for your library account, and it's how you'll access all of our digital resources. Since almost everything is digital and online this fall, you might want to consider downloading the U of R app. It's a more mobile-friendly version of the U of R website, and instructions for getting it are on the U of R website. And the U of R website really is your portal for everything that you'll need this semester, and that includes libraries. So I'm just going to try sharing my screen with you here and point out a few things. Okay, so when you go to www.uregina.ca, you can find our website under the Federated College tab. You can also click on this library heading across the top. This is where you'll find Quick Find, which is the catalog that I'll show you in just a moment, as well as the databases tab. I don't think I'm going to have time to get into that today, but it's another important tab, and our research and citation guides over here. And if you scroll down just a little, this is where you'll see our hours. And if you clicked on any of these links, you get taken to our respective contact information. Also, like everybody else, we haven't transitioned from being shut down for 18 months before. So we're kind of figuring things out as we go this fall. Things might change, our services might change. And as they do, we will update this section, this current library services heading. If you click on the students tab, this is where you can see any updates or changes to our services. Okay. Okay, so let's talk for a moment about the big differences you'll notice about university libraries compared to ones that you're probably more familiar with. Maybe your high school had a library, or you frequently use the public library in your city or town. The first way we're different is we're bigger. I shouldn't say that. Us federated college libraries aren't super big in terms of physical space, but the Archer Library is. It's its own 6-story building. There's 2.4 million print items in that building alone. And what we have in print is actually a fraction of what we have digitally. Our e-resources collection, that's our ebooks, our electronic journal articles, our streaming video, that it's massive. So these databases that I'm going to be showing you, each of them contains hundreds of thousands of e-resources, and we have over 400 databases. The second thing you'll notice is that we're open for longer. At least we will be when we're back to being physically open. Luther and Campion have had to cut our remote access hours down a bit. But next semester, when we're up and running, most of us are open until 9, 10, or 11 o'clock at night on weekdays, and a considerable amount of time on Saturdays and Sundays as well. You'll remember from my earlier slide that there's more than one library here, which is different than most high schools. And you'll notice, particularly at Archer, that there isn't just one librarian sitting at a desk or one person that keeps answering your emails. Archer has about 60 people working there. And across the 4 libraries, we've got people who specialize in helping you with IT issues. We've got librarians who specialize in almost every possible subject area. Everyone has their specific area of expertise. Our shelving system is different. Your school and public libraries keep their books organized through a system called Dewey Decimal. Academic and research libraries across Canada, the US, and most other countries use a system called Library of Congress. We identify each book with a call number, which is a series of letters and numbers, and that's how it's placed on the shelf. It's a combination of alphabetical order and numerical order. It's not going to matter too much to you now, but once we're open and you're browsing through our stacks, you might have some questions about how that system works. And finally, the single biggest difference is our purpose and who we serve. I remember my high school library, when you had a paper or a book report to write, it wasn't the first place you went. I mean, it had a lot of computers. It had a full few sets of encyclopedias, lots of novels, lots of magazines. The novels and magazines didn't have to do much with our classes. I mean, you were encouraged to read them in your spare time, and that was a very important and valuable way to promote literacy in teenagers. But I never really associated what was in our high school library with research. So I was really surprised when I came to university and discovered that the libraries really are the hub of activity on campus. That's where everybody is, and your instructors are thoroughly expecting you to use the materials housed there. Once in-person classes get going again, you'll notice that a lot of your instructors will place those required readings on reserve at the library circulation desks, meaning that's where you'll have to go to get the readings that you need to do for class. And also, the material that our libraries own, whether it's electronic or print, is purchased specifically with your courses in mind. Often it's your profs, your instructors, who are recommending titles for us to buy. So yeah, we have some novels, but they're mostly novels that are being used as texts in our English classes. And we've got magazines, but they are a special kind where the writing and the research that went into them is of high academic quality. I'm going to talk more about that in a sec. So in short, we are here to support the academic and intellectual pursuits of our students and our professors. And even though 2 of the 4 libraries aren't going to physically open this term, our instructors are going to expect you to access library resources. When you hand in a paper or an essay to a prof in university, the prof or the instructor is going to be grading you on the amount of research you did and the quality of the sources you used in that research, just as much as they'll be grading you on your writing or your ideas. So let's unpack the word research for a sec. It's both a noun and a verb. As a verb, it refers to an action, of course, but it's also a skill. It's something that you can get better at. And as a noun, it's the information that you gather, that you assess, and that you present in your own work. It sounds pretty intimidating, but it doesn't need to be overwhelming. However, it should take up a significant part of the time you spend on a project. And I think a lot of high school students are a little caught off guard with how much time research actually takes. it doesn't necessarily have to wait for you to select a topic. You don't have to think of something to write about and then go do your research. Research can be what helps you select a topic. And that's something else to be aware of. The type of research that you're doing changes throughout the project. You often start off with these fairly general parameters, and as your topic becomes more refined, so too does your research. A lot of students get confused about research because they think it's plagiarism to use somebody else's work in your own. It absolutely is if you don't cite it properly, which we're going to talk about later. But engaging with other people's work on your topic is one of the things your instructors are expecting you to do. So it is important to use other sources and to incorporate those sources into your work appropriately and ethically. So in addition to research skills, another important set of skills that your university courses are trying to instill in you are what we call critical thinking skills. This is the ability to assess or evaluate information, to discern the good from the bad. And that's what we're going to talk about now. At the university level, our instructors will expect you to use what we call scholarly or academic sources in your research. So let's talk about what those are. They're often considered the opposite of what the common reader consumes, or what we call popular sources. Can I make this bigger here? Here we go. So here's a list of criteria that we use to determine whether something is scholarly and can be used in your university level research, or popular and should be left out of university level research. The first thing to look at is the author. The author or authors of a scholarly source are scholars. These are experts in their particular academic discipline. So these are usually people with PhDs or master's degrees, and they are usually people hired by a university or other research institution to teach, research, or both. So these authors spend months, years, even entire careers researching, teaching, and writing about their specific area of interest. They know what they're talking about. Conversely, the author of a popular source is often someone like a journalist who gets assigned a topic and is given a tight deadline to throw themselves into the topic, do some surface level research so that they can write and publish. They don't have the time to become experts in the subject that scholarly authors are, and they don't have the specialized education in that field. Also, a lot of times with popular sources, we don't even know who the author is. And this is particularly true of popular sources on the internet. So a pro tip, at the university level, you should stick to sources with a named author or authors. The next thing to look at is the audience, the intended audience or the intended reader. And one of the clues that can help you here is to look at the language used in the source. Scholarly sources are written for fellow scholars, so other researchers or students working or studying that subject material at the university level, like you. So these types of sources will use elevated language and something we call jargon, which is a vocabulary specific to a certain discipline. Your popular source, on the other hand, is written in fairly accessible language and will probably cover the basics of the subject matter because it can't assume that its reader has any prior knowledge of the topic. Next, look for some footnotes or a bibliography or references page, because just like you, the authors of a scholarly source have had to do research in order to write and publish, and they will be citing the sources that they used in their research. Your popular sources, on the other hand, rarely refer to any other sources, or if they do, the bibliographies will be fairly brief. Okay, so the next one is a big one, the review or the editing process. I'm going to start with popular sources this time. First, a lot of popular sources aren't edited because they aren't published. Again, this is the case with a lot of web sources that get posted to the internet rather than published. But even the popular stuff that does get published usually goes like this. The author writes an article or a manuscript and they submit it to a publisher. The publisher decides if it's worth pursuing, and if they determine that it is, they will assign it to an editor who proofreads it and works with the author to sort out grammatical changes to the content, maybe fact checks, fixes some sentence structure, that kind of thing. And when both of those parties are happy with it, the editor and the author, then it gets put in line to hit the presses. But the editing process for a scholarly source is very different. When a scholarly author writes a scholarly article or manuscript and submits it to a scholarly publisher, the publisher doesn't really look at it, what they'll do is they'll turn it over to a team of peers. These are academics, a group of 2, 3, 4, possibly more well-respected scholars, again, probably people with PhDs in that particular field. So they will all look at the article or manuscript, they will all suggest changes, and they all need to okay it before it gets published. And these academic peers aren't checking for spelling mistakes. They're strictly focused on the accuracy of the material, the testing methods. They're checking for any bias or problems with the research presented in the source. So as you can imagine, getting all these people involved, this peer review process is rigorous and it is time consuming. And it means that scholarly sources are just a lot slower to produce and become available. But what it does do is ensure that you're getting the most verified and accurate information. The next step is easy. It's the publisher. Scholarly sources are published by academic or scholarly publishers. Often the word university is in the publisher name, like Oxford University Press or University of Toronto Press. So that's something to look for, but there are plenty of others. And this is something that maybe Google can help with if you're ever unsure. Search for the publisher website and read what they're about. Usually they'll explain pretty quickly in their website if they're an academic publisher or a more niche publisher of some kind. Your popular sources are usually published by media outlets or those more mainstream trade paperback publishers like Random House or Penguin, even those niche publishers that have a focus on something else other than scholarly books. And again, a lot of popular sources simply aren't published. They're posted on the internet, which is not something you'll ever see from a scholarly source. Even the scholarly sources that we consider to be open access have gone through a publication process. Finally, the format might offer a clue. Scholarly sources really only exist as books or journal articles. And additionally, most things you'll find in an academic library are scholarly sources. And also, scholarly sources, for the most part, are not free. Now, there are a lot of librarians out there who are working to change that through something called open access. But as it stands right now, most scholarly material is quite expensive. Academic libraries purchase scholarly sources through specialized booksellers that universities deal with, but scholarly sources tend not to be widely available at places like Chapters or Amazon. Popular sources can totally vary in format. Magazines, newspapers, books, websites, blogs, reviews, videos. They can be found at places like public libraries or Chapters or Amazon. A lot of them are free on the internet, and in places where they are for sale, they're usually fairly cheap, at least compared to scholarly sources. Okay, that takes care of evaluating sources. So let's talk about finding them in our libraries, remembering that most of our collection is digital. Of course, we have physical books on our shelves. I think I mentioned 2.4 million of them at Archer alone, but that's a fraction of what we really own. All of these digital sources can easily be accessed from your home. The Quick Find catalog searches for material that we own. That's all of our e-resources as well as our printed material, and that's owned in any of the 4 academic libraries on campus. So you're searching all of the libraries when you do this. And you're searching for the material that, for the large part, has been paid for. And it's important to understand that because we purchase this material for the use of our students and our staff, and it's not accessible to the general public. Okay, so anybody can access our website, anybody can even access our catalog, but when it comes time to actually being able to view our ebooks and our digital articles or our streaming media, you need to verify you are a current student in a class, and you do that with that username and password that we talked about earlier. Before we look at Quick Find though, there's another skill that we need to practice. So once in a while, you might be pointed in the direction of a particular book. You'll know the title or the author. Maybe your prof recommends you track something specific down, or maybe you're looking at a source that keeps referring to another source and you decide you should probably give this a look. So you know exactly what you're looking for, and that's great. You simply type in that title or that author name into Quick Find. But usually that's not the case. Usually you have an assignment. Let's say it's an essay you have to write. Maybe you have a topic. Maybe you don't even have a clue yet what you want to write about, and you certainly don't know any titles of books or names of authors that you're going to need. So what you need to do is distill your topic, or whatever early seeds of a topic you might have, into a few unique keywords or phrases. And one bad thing about Quick Find is that it is not intuitive. I mean, we've all gotten a little used to search engines like Google that can accurately guess what we're looking for as soon as we start typing. You don't have to be super specific. But with Quick Find, you do need to be specific. If you typed something like tips for starting university in a pandemic into Google, you'd get exactly that. But if you typed tips for starting university in a pandemic into Quick Find, it wouldn't know what to do. It doesn't know what to do with prepositions like for, in, and it just doesn't know what to do with entire sentences like that. You could try typing in study skills and first year university and COVID-19, but you need to be specific and combine these keywords and phrases in a certain way. This is something you'll see yourself get better at with time. And as you improve at this, your search results will improve. You'll see you're able to save time in the whole searching process. So let me just see if I can get back to the U of R webpage. Okay. So we're going to go back to www.uregina.ca, and we're going to click on that library heading across the top. And you'll see Quick Find is the first tab on the home page. Now you can start typing your keywords right into this box, but my advice to you is to first log into your library account for various reasons that I'd love to explain to you when we have more time. You'll get more results when you are logged in. And once you're on this page, just click on New Search and Advanced Search. This will allow us to better string together more than one keyword or phrase. So I've got a research paper on this topic in mind. Okay. Now, once you have a list of results, right now we have over 486,000 results. You're not ready to look at them yet until you make some adjustments over here on the left. And this is where the magic happens. So I want to start off looking for books. So I'm going to limit my results to books under resource type and apply that filter. And if I wanted, I could limit my results to books that had been published in a certain time period. And maybe I really only want books written in English. There are all kinds of limits you can set over here on the left, so explore how these can work for you. And then you look through your list, and when you see something that you want to look at, you click on it, and now you're in its cataloging record. Now you might be able to read a bit more about the book further down here, but this is an example of an ebook. You'll know that because it says online access here, and it will provide a link or maybe more than one if you get it through more than one ebook provider under View It. So you simply click on this link. You may need to log in again. Yep. That's the same username and password that we used before. And then you've got the book ready to go. Now, ebooks tend to look a bit different depending on the publisher. This particular one lets us flip the pages using these arrow keys, or we can look at the table of contents over here on the left. Maybe go directly to a particular chapter. You can also search the entire book for a particular keyword. Okay. Now going back to this original list, let's look at what would happen if the book you wanted wasn't an ebook. Okay, here's an example, Sport as a Business. You'll see the difference here is that I don't have online access showing up. And when I click on the record, where those blue links used to be under View It, I now have a Library of Congress call number and a library location telling me which library to go to and how to find the book on the shelf. Now, if this was a Luther or Campion book this fall, maybe you wouldn't think that this is something that you could get to or use with our libraries being closed, right? However, you will see these options up here, request and digitization. What you can do, doesn't matter what library it's in, is request the book to do curbside pickup. We have these book lockers outside of Archer Library. So if you want to do kind of a makeshift curbside pickup, you would select Archer Library as your pickup. If there's a absolute maximum not needed date after, you could enter it in here. And then we ask that you put your mailing address in, even though you're coming to pick it up, just in case our lockers fill and we have to mail things to you. Or if you wanted it mailed out straight away, you didn't want to pick it up ever, you could just pick that right off the bat. Select personal delivery, home address, type in your mailing address, enter a not needed after date if there is one, and click on request, and the book will get mailed to you. Okay. Another option, and something that might be a bit quicker and more convenient, is that if you know that there's only a certain section of the book, let's look at the table of contents here. See, only one chapter even mentions race, I think. So maybe that's the only chapter I want. I can place a digitization request. So you click on this instead. And what this means is that the home library will scan the chapter that you need and email it to you. So you would enter in the page numbers or the chapter number or the chapter title, and then you would check that you have read and understood the copyright implications of this, and then click on request. There's a big caveat to this. We are bound by law to comply with copyright regulations. We cannot digitize an entire book for you. So you're likely only to get one chapter or 10% of a book. So remember that before you place a digitization request. And if you do, just be specific about the exact section you need. You can use the table of contents feature here at the bottom of the cataloging record if that helps. But yeah, if you need a significant portion of the book, your best bet is to arrange to get the whole book through the mail or curbside pickup. Okay, while we're on advanced search, I just want to show you a few more things you can do. By clicking on this drop-down menu here, you can search for things other than keywords. So maybe you have a particular author in mind. You could select author and then type in their last name, followed by a comma, and then their first name. I should mention that Quick Find is super fussy about spelling. It's not intuitive, like I said. So if you typed in Shakespeare, William here and got 0 results, you must have spelled it wrong, or just double check that you've placed the last name before the first name. You can also select title under this drop-down menu. Type it in. And when you find the one you're looking for, you click on it. Now, this particular book we get through 2 different ways. We have the physical copy at Archer Library, but we also have an ebook. That's why there's 2 things showing up there. So 2 different links through 2 different ebook providers will get you the ebook, or we have the physical copy at Archer. But there's I wanted to take this chance to show you another useful part of these cataloging records. Each book has subject heading categories listed under it. So if you find a book really well suited to your topic, check out these subject headings. And if one of these headings suits your topic, click on it for a complete list of other books that we have on the same subject. And now you can go tracking these down, and you don't have to worry so much about whether or not you're using the right keywords. Incidentally, subject browsing is a whole other way to search for books in this catalog, and it's a method that I like to use when I'm struggling to come up with a keyword, or maybe I just still don't have a topic narrowed down and I just have a general idea of what I want to write about. So what you're seeing here is that we have so many books about racism that they've broken them down into subcategories. So we've got some about racism in specific locations or specific cultures or spheres. And I'm just going to keep scrolling a bit. And because it's this act of scrolling sometimes that might just help tweak your interest in something that ultimately leads to a focused topic and a research idea. Okay, so let's move on to journal articles. You'll be happy to know that you search for them the same way. The only difference is the boxes on the left. I'm partial to an advanced search rather than a basic, so I'm going to start there. So the trick to looking for journal articles is all about these limits on the left before you even look at your results. Right now I'm at almost 14,000. Before you even look at your results, check off 3 of these boxes automatically. The first is peer-reviewed journals. This ensures that you're getting the scholarly sources that I talked about earlier. Select full text online so that you're filtering out those paper journals or microfiche journals that are locked in our buildings right now. And then select articles as your resource type instead of books. Then you apply those filters, and then you go through your list. Now we're at 1,700. Like I said, scholarly publishing is slow and rigorous, and if you weren't looking for such a current and new topic, your journal article results would usually be quite a bit longer than your book results. So when you see something you like, you click on it. Just like an ebook, a blue link should appear halfway through the record. Okay, so in this case, we have 6 different blue links. That just means that we get it through a whole bunch of different databases, and there's some overlap here. Shouldn't matter which one of these you click on. And then once you do, you'll get taken to the host page for the journal database. Now, usually somewhere on this page, you'll find a PDF option. It's a little bit hidden over here. And that is the preferred way of viewing articles, just to ensure that you're using the right page numbers and stuff with your citations. And before I click on that, I just want to show you that a lot of your citation information is right here, as well as our DOI number. DOI, or Digital Object Identifier, is a preferred way of citing electronic articles in APA and now MLA style. You don't always see one of these, and if you don't, it's usually okay to copy and paste the URL into your bibliography or references list. Okay, so click on PDF, and here's your article to read, print off, download, however you need to use it. A few things to look for to ensure that it's scholarly. Look for some university affiliations or credentials of the authors. Right off the bat here, we have some superscript 1 and 2 footnotes, and it tells us right underneath that some of the authors are from University of Queensland and some of the authors are from University of Adelaide. As long as you see a university affiliation, that's usually a good sign that this is a scholarly source. And then also look for a nice long bibliography or references list at the end of the article. Yeah, there we go. Okay. A handy tip when you're viewing something in PDF and you just need to do a quick skim to see if it will be relevant to your topic or not, hit Control F on your keyboard, which will pop up a little search box in the top right, and you can type in a keyword or part of a keyword here. And one last thing, this references list at the end of your articles or book chapters, don't ignore those. Look to see if this author is citing any books or articles that might be helpful for your project. Because if you see something that you might want to track down for your own assignment, now all you have to do is copy the title and paste it into Quick Find, and you don't have to worry so much about using subject browses and keywords. Now, it doesn't happen very often, but occasionally, especially if you're using this bibliography to guide you towards other sources, you might come across an article or a book that looks perfect, but when you plug it into Quick Find, nothing turns up. We don't have it. This is an instance where you might want to use our service called interlibrary loans. We can track that book or article from a different university library and bring it in for you, or we'll have them email the article to you. But I don't know, in all honesty, interlibrary loans are something that you're more likely to use next year or in your 3rd or 4th year classes. You should almost always have more than enough research for a 1st year assignment with what we've already got here at the U of R. Okay, so this is searching for library resources in quite a nutshell. There are a bunch of other quick find tips and tricks, as well as subject-specific databases. This is something I'll get into more in depth when you see me in your classes. And I'm happy to walk you through them at any time that you're ready. So those digital items, those ebooks, those journal articles that I just showed you can be accessed anytime, any number of times. There are very few restrictions on how to use them, but the physical books sitting on our shelves do have a few rules. Normally, our physical books can be borrowed for 3 weeks at a time. However, as we're transitioning to being back on campus, and yet not everybody's back on campus, and we're We're not particularly encouraging people to be on campus if they don't want to or have to be. We're making all books due back at the end of the term. So any physical book you borrowed from a library this fall will be due back at the end of the fall semester, which I think is December 23rd or something like that. But just be aware that we'll likely go back to the 3-week loan period for most books next semester. I guess we'll have to see where we're at with COVID. You can have up to 100 books on your account at any time. It's more than you'll ever need. And once we go back to those 3-week loans, you'll be able to renew your books past their due dates. You can do that up to 5 times. You can recall books, meaning that if there's a book that you really need, but that somebody else has out, probably until December 23rd, you can place a request on it. And that triggers us to contact the person who has it out and ask them to bring it back sooner. And when they do, it gets placed on hold for you to come pick up, or we'll mail it out. So that sounds like a good service, but be aware that you might also be on the receiving end of it, that a book you have out might be recalled and you have to comply. You'd have to bring it back early. It's the best way we have of ensuring things are fair and everybody has access to what they need. Is my text backwards, or is that just look okay? My screen must be mirrored or something. Aki's going on my other screen. Anyway. DVDs, reference material, things like dictionaries, style guides, these all have shorter loan periods because they're in higher demand. You are charged 50 cents a day per book if you don't return or renew them by their due dates. And once you're a month overdue, or if you reach a maximum of $16, I think it is, in overdue fines per book, our system will declare the book lost, and then you'll be charged to replace the cost of the book, which would be quite a significant charge. Like I was saying, the scholarly books are quite expensive. If you have something recalled from you, the fines are stiffer. And also that course reserve material that I was talking about, the required readings that instructors make available at libraries, won't be available in the fall, but probably again in the winter. That's high demand stuff, and it comes with higher fines. Okay, so we'll move on to my last portion here, citation styles. So once you've found all of that research in Quick Find, you've got your journal articles, you've got your books, what's next? Well, you do have to read this stuff, or at least skim it and look for the sections that are relevant to your topic. Throughout this process, take careful notes of what you want to use in your paper, what you want to quote, and also make note of where that information is coming from. Even just jotting down page numbers and the titles of the books or the articles that you're grabbing this stuff from will save you time in the end. Then you write your paper, and then you write your references page or your bibliography, and you insert or check all of your in-text citations. So what is a bibliography exactly? I'm sure you used bibliographies in high school, but maybe not in the same way. First, depending on the class you're in, it might be called something else. In classes like psychology, we call it a references page. In classes like English, we call it a works cited list. In classes like history, it's a bibliography. Whatever, it's a list of all the sources that you used to inform your assignment. It appears at the end of your assignment, and it's written in a specific format or style. At the U of R, we use 3 main citation styles: APA, MLA, and Chicago. So why do you need a bibliography? Well, there's a bunch of reasons for that, but the quick answer is it's university. It's expected that you'll be doing research for your assignments, and that research needs to be cited. It's standard academic practice. What do you need to cite? Anytime you use the exact words of another writer, we call that a direct quotation. Anytime you paraphrase or put someone else's ideas into your own words, or summarize someone else's thoughts or ideas. Anytime you use statistics or examples, case studies, theories, arguments, viewpoints, figures, graphs, tables that somebody else created, if you use them in your own work, you cite them. And every time you incorporate a source into your paper, you actually cite it twice. Once right in the text of your paper where you're talking about it, where you're using it. In MLA and APA style, we call that an in-text or parenthetical citation. In Chicago, you'll probably create a footnote. And then you cite those same sources again in your references list or your works cited list or bibliography. So all three of these styles are fussy. And if you're new to them, you'll likely mess up the first couple of times, or at least you'll get a headache from all of the picky rules. So it's important to leave yourself enough time at the end of the essay writing process to get it right. It does take a long time. It's also important to use one of the approved guides. These guides walk you through how to do any kind of citation in that particular style. So this is APA, MLA. This big beast is the Chicago one. So these official guides are updated and republished every few years by their organizations, and every academic library at the U of R has copies of them. But there is a really good website, an online resource for citation. It's called OWL at Purdue University. So Google OWL, O-W-L, and Purdue, P-U-R-D-U-E. It'll walk you through how to do citations in any of these three styles. Just be aware that there are all kinds of citation generators online, and these can be bad news. They mess up a lot of the time because they're robots and they're only as good as the information that gets inputted into them. And if that information is just a little bit off, then the resulting citation is garbage. And another problem with those online citation generators is that they're slow to get updated. And these publishing guides are constantly being updated and coming out with new editions. MLA just had a new edition this summer, and very few online tools for MLA have been updated to reflect those changes. But the good news is that you have citation generators, real live ones. Those are your librarians. You can ask us for help with citation. Which kind of leads me to my wrap up and my final slide. I think that I'm here to help. That's my job. I help students with all of the stuff that we just talked about. So don't hesitate to send me an email or call me when you have questions at all. And with that, I think I'm gonna slow down and see if we have any questions.
Earlier, someone had asked if you have any recommendations of when they should be buying their textbooks.
Well, that's a good question because things are very much in transition right now. Our bookstore has sort of ceased to exist, and we're using a new online bookstore called Follett. That's a very separate unit on campus than the library, so I don't know a lot about it, but I would be ordering them now if I haven't already ordered my textbooks. Your profs could conceivably start assigning reading on the very first day of class. And this new online bookstore, if it's going to take a few days or maybe even up to a week for those books to ship, you'll want to have them in your hands pretty early on in the semester. If there are any problems with textbook orders on a mass scale, and this is very common where publishers just run out of copies, and you'll find like lots of people in your classes don't have the textbook. It's nobody's fault. It's kind of beyond their control. Your profs will be super understanding and sympathetic. And for the first little while, maybe for the first week, they'll make sure that the required readings are digitized up on your courses, and that's probably where you'll access the majority of them. Oh, lots of questions about textbooks, which is kind of out of my comfort zone. But so yeah, a lot of the textbooks right now are digital. They're usually on these things like, some of them are called the Revel platform, where there's all this other like kind of software incorporated with it. What you should get when you purchase it is some kind of an access code, and then there'll be I'm assuming a web address or a link of some kind that you would go to, and then you would enter in that access code. I don't know if you can access it now. Most of these e-textbooks are published by really big textbook publishers. They're very different than scholarly publishers, but textbook publishers are pretty stingy about making sure that access to their textbooks doesn't get shared or happens any longer than it needs to. So you'll probably lose access at the end of the semester to that e-textbook, and you might not be able to get access early on, but I would definitely try it. I mean, if that's what the problem is, that you're just trying to access it too soon, I would think that there's going to be some kind of a message that tells you you have to wait till August 30th or whatever it is. Maria, have you used e-textbooks in any of your classes? You might know more
Yeah,
about that than I do.
I have. A lot of them are just like almost like an online PDF, but also, guys, the professors choose their own textbooks. So at the end of the day, they may be the person to ask if you're struggling with a digital copy or anything like that. There is a reason why the professor chose that textbook. So again, we were talking about this before, email them ahead of time if you're very, very curious. But also, if you wait till your first day of lectures, chances are other people are wondering the same thing. And at the end of the day, the professor is the expert on the textbook that they chose for you guys.
Yeah. Some of them are kind of fumbling through this whole e-textbook process too. Like it's really only been in the last couple of years that publishers went this direction. And but I'm thinking that there'll be lots of support through this Follett company, that like there'll be some kind of a email address or chat service or something that you can use. Yeah, textbooks are quite separate from libraries, and bookstores are separate from libraries because it's just a different kind of content that you're using. You're typically not going to use your textbook for researching your papers and your assignments. Your instructor is going to expect you to branch out, and that's where you'll end up looking through the libraries. But yeah, most of that textbook stuff happens through this new Follett company now.
I think there's a good one in the chat. It says, say you're unable to get your own textbook for a class. Do the libraries have any copies of these textbooks?
We can't buy e-textbooks. It's that they're designed to not be shared, and that is not the way libraries work. We need to be able to share our sources. So these e-textbooks are published, like that's their whole modus operandi, is to make sure that use is individual. So they won't sell to libraries, they just won't. But if it's a physical textbook, like an actual print textbook that you can hold and flip through, then we are more than likely going to have a copy on reserve. In future semesters, when we are fully open, we try to have copies of all textbooks on reserve, as long as they're not e-textbooks. But that's kind of up to your prof too, whether or not they'll put a copy on reserve. Not everyone does it. But yeah, it's definitely something to look into. At the very least, we might have older editions of some of these e-textbooks, which maybe the content's kind of the same, but you want to check with the prof and make sure that that's okay.
Yeah, that's what I always did in my lectures, guys. Ask them, like ask the professor, is there any copy at the library that we can use? And then they will let you know. And once you have the name or the edition, then you can go up to Carla or another librarian and say, this is what I need. And if it's on hold, they'll likely know exactly where it is.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned, because when the libraries do have copies of textbooks, they're super high demand. And so we won't even circulate them the right way. We put them on course reserve. And because nobody's operating course reserves in the fall, we're loaning them out just like regular books. We really have no other option. So you might get into kind of a recall war if you rely on a library copy as your textbook. But in future semesters, when we are able to put that stuff on course reserves, it's really, yeah, it's a cheap and easy way to access your textbook. What is a patron ID? Typically that's your username, like your UR course's username. It depends on like where you saw that, but yeah, if you're using the library's system to log into your account, it'll be the same username as your course's username and password. Sometimes there might be certain things that will ask you the barcode number or your student number off of your student ID card, but most library services you'll be able to just use your username.
There's another question on the chat. Are the libraries ever open during breaks or the summer months, even if it's just online?
Yep. Yeah, so if you've got a reading week, we're still going to be open. The Archer and First Nations Library, I'm sure, will be physically open their regular hours during this fall's reading week. Archer typically, I don't know, we'll have to see what they do because of the pandemic, but sometimes they stay open even till 2 a.m. during final exams. So we'll have to see what they decide to do with how the pandemic is rolling out by then. But yeah, we're open all the time, all year long, online too. So even Lutheran Campion, if we don't have our doors open, we'll still be operating remotely through reading weeks and throughout the summer. The only times that we are typically closed are on staff holidays.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Carla. I actually learned a few things I wish I had known a few semesters ago, but that's great. And if anyone has any questions, please make sure you're reaching out. Carla is a lifesaver, I will say that. Any general questions with both books, library, or just really anything, like we were saying before, there's no reason why you guys should ever feel lost and just be sitting there feeling lost. There's always someone to reach out to.